This guide covers all the actions Dawntrail's Archer and Bard learns from level 1 to 100 in order. We go over how each action is meant to be used and recommend ways to use it when relevant. We will summarize the attack rotation at level 50 and then summarize changes in it at level 60, 70, 80 and 90. In the final summary at level 100, we outline an optimized opener and explain how it leads into the general rotation, alongside 2-minute burst considerations. We also touch on the stat priorities of the Bard. Now then, Heavy Shot is your starting action. It functions as your filler weapon skill, so you simply use it when you have nothing more important to do. At level 2, you learn the weapon skill Straight Shot. This can only be used when you have the buff Hawk's Eye, which it spends on use. Heavy Shot is also upgraded to have a 20% chance of granting a so-called proc of Hawk's Eye. When Hawk's Eye is available, Straight Shot should be used instead of Heavy Shot. At level 4, you learn the ability Raging Strikes, which boosts all the damage you do for a while. This action should be used as often as possible, but preferably you want to late weave it to make the most of the duration. A crucial distinction between weapon skills, often called GCDs or global cooldowns, and abilities, often called OGCDs or off global cooldowns, is that while weapon skills are beholden to their 2.5 second shared recast timer, the global cooldown, abilities are only limited by the fact that most actions incur an about half-second animation lock. For this reason, abilities should be weaved between weapon skills. You can typically fit 2 abilities between 2 weapon skills. Late weaving is the specific concept of delaying the use of an ability as late as possible without delaying your next weapon skill, to make the most of the buff the ability may give during your weapon skills. If you want to learn more about these concepts, I have a video that explains this in more detail. At present, you will need a modest amount of skill speed to be able to fit an extra weapon skill by late weaving Raging Strikes, but even without the skill speed, it is still recommended as it gives you the largest possible window to fit extra ability attacks in the window as you unlock them. At level 6, you learn the weapon skill Venomous Bite, which does some damage up front and much more damage as a damage over time effect, or DOT for short. The dot lasts 45 seconds and makes Venomous Bite stronger than Heavy Shot if the enemy survives at least 12 seconds with the dot on them. Additionally, if you use dots like Venomous Bite while affected by temporary damage buffs, like Raging Strikes, then the damage bonus from that buff will apply to the full duration of the dot. This is the concept known as dot snapshotting. Also at level 6, you learn the role action and ability Leg Graze. This slows your target for a bit, but is generally only helpful in solo play and emergency situations. At level 8, you learn the role action and ability Second Wind, which heals you for a significant amount. When in a group, it is recommended to only use Second Wind if you're the only one that needs significant healing, as otherwise the healer will probably cast a party-wide heal anyway. At level 10, you learn the role action and ability Foot Graze. This binds your target for a bit, but is broken free by attacks. Take note that damage over time will not break this bind, but the upfront damage will. Although this is very neat, this is not helpful outside of solo content or emergency situations. At level 12, you learn the ability Bloodletter, which is an attack that holds 2 charges, with 1 charging every 15 seconds. You should weave this ability between your weapon skills whenever you have a charge. You can gain some extra damage by saving a charge when Raging Strikes is about to be ready. You should, however, always make sure to have the cooldown ticking by not sitting on both charges. In a situation where you have multiple charges at once, I highly advise against weaving 2 Bloodletters back to back. Split them up over 2 weapon skills. At level 15, you learn the ability Repelling Shot, which on use pushes you back 10 yalms in about half a second. This can be useful for positioning, but in most cases this action is not particularly important. For reference, players run at about 6 yalms per second by default. As dungeons become available at level 15, it is worth mentioning that, while ranged physical damage dealer jobs like archers and bards have great range, their ability to move at all times means that you should try to stick by your group. In essence, if you have no good reason to stand far away from your target, it is better to get closer to your group to make it easier for your healer to heal you, for instance. At level 18, you learn the weapon skill Quick Knock, an area of effect attack, or AoE for short, which beats both Heavy Shot and Straight Shot on 2 or more targets. On 2 targets, Venomous Bite has to last at least 24 seconds to break even with Quick Knock, and Quick Knock is always better than Venomous Bite if it can hit at least 3 targets. At level 20, you learn the role action and ability Peloton, which can be used freely to make you and your party run 20% faster while not in combat. Note that Sprint makes you run 30% faster, and that using 2 speed increasing effects together will result in just the strongest effect, meaning that sprint will take priority. I recommend using Peloton quite aggressively whenever you're not in combat, to make sure everyone in range benefits. You can even run back to help party members that fall behind catch up. At level 24, you learn the role action and ability Head Graze, which can be used to stop interruptible actions. If an enemy is using an interruptible action, the cast bar will be red and pulsing and blinking at you. Whenever possible, try to interrupt these casts. At level 25, you learn the weapon skill Wide Volley, which, similar to Straight Shot, can only be used while you have Hawk's Eye. Simultaneously, Quick Knock is upgraded to have the same 20% chance to grant Hawk's Eye. Wide Volley beats Straight Shot on 2 or more targets as well and should be used over Quick Knock when available. Notably, Wide Volley strikes in a circle around your target, where Quick Knock strikes in a cone in front of you, directed at your target. At level 30, you learn the weapon skill Windbite, which does slightly less upfront damage than Venomous Bite, but slightly more damage over the duration. For this reason, you should always apply Windbite first. On 2 targets, Windbite has to last at least 24 seconds to beat Quick Knock, and on 3 targets it needs to last 42 seconds. For that reason, on AoE, I recommend spreading Windbite and Venomous Bite while the enemies are spread out enough that you cannot hit 3 enemies with Quick Knock, and then resort to just Quick Knock and Wide Volley when you can. Also at level 30, doing your class quest line will eventually lead you to the Bard quest, which is available once you complete the main scenario quest, Self-Management. Once you unlock the Bard, remember to equip your Soul Crystal to change into the Bard job. As an extra optional bonus, unlocking the Bard gives you access to the quest Plucking the Heartstrings at Miketo's Amphitheater in Old Gridania, which gives you access to the performance menu to play music. The starting action of the Bard is the ability Mage's Ballad, which is an ability that can only be activated while in combat. Using Mage's Ballad grants you and your party the Mage's Ballad buff for 45 seconds, or until you replace it with another song, which increases damage done by 1%. Every 3 seconds this buff runs, there's an 80% chance that it will activate its repertoire effect, which pushes Bloodletter's cooldown forward by 7.5 seconds instantly. This of course means that during Mage's Ballad, you should be extra sure to use Bloodletter as quickly as you can weave it when it is available. Try to use Mage's Ballad alongside Raging Strikes, as they have the same cooldown. At level 32, you learn the role action and ability Arm's Length, which makes you immune to most knockbacks, and also has the additional effect that if an enemy swings at you, it reduces their attack speed for a while. This is a very strong defensive tool if you need it, so consider using this ability when you're targeted by enemies, especially if the tank dies, for instance. At level 35, you learn the ability The Warden's Paeon, which can remove a removable debuff from yourself or another party member. If you use it with no removable debuffs available on your target, it instead applies a buff that removes the first debuff that can be removed that appears on the target. You can identify removable debuffs by the bluish-white line above the debuff icon. Remember to make use of this ability, as it has incredible power as the only ability-based debuff removal in the game. At level 38, you learn the ability Barrage, which grants you Barrage for 10 seconds, which enables Straight Shot and Wide Volley, and when spent on either, causes Straight Shot to hit 3 times and causes Wide Volley to do more damage. If you're affected by both Barrage and Hawk's Eye simultaneously, then Barrage will always be spent first. I recommend using Barrage during Raging Strikes, and it should be used on Straight Shot on 1 or 2 targets, Wide Volley on 3 or more targets. At level 40, you learn the ability Army's Paeon. Similar to Mage's Ballad, it can only be used while in combat, and it boosts everyone in your party's direct hit rate by 3% as a small bonus. Additionally, Army's Paeon's repertoire effect, which works the same as Mage's Ballad, is to reduce your global recast timer on weapon skills by 4%, stacking up to 4 times for the duration of the song. After the 4th stack, additional procs do nothing. Keep in mind that Army's Paeon does not stack with Mage's Ballad, so while you would want to use both on cooldown, you should use Mage's Ballad first, and then when it has less than 3 seconds left, you can switch to Army's Paeon. In the final 3 seconds of Mage's Ballad, it is not capable of proccing anymore, since the final proc happens at the 3-second mark. At this level range though, you can also opt to let each song play out completely before changing, since their combined duration is shorter than their cooldowns, and they of course still grant a party-wide bonus. You should continue to use Raging Strikes alongside Mage's Ballad, even if Army's Paeon might be a little stronger on AoE at this level. This is because Mage's Ballad is superior on single target, so combining it with Raging Strikes and Barrage on boss fights is usually the preferred option. Even on large AoE packs, you should still use Raging Strikes and Mage's Ballad, especially because of the next ability. At level 45, you learn the ability Reign of Death, which is an AoE alternative to Bloodletter in every aspect. They even share cooldown. On 2 or more targets, Reign of Death replaces Bloodletter. At level 50, you learn the ability Battle Voice, which boosts you and everyone in your party's direct hit rate by 20%. As it has the same cooldown as most of your other buffs, it should be used alongside them. I recommend using Battle Voice before Raging Strikes, so that Raging Strikes can continue to be late weaved. Now, to summarize at level 50, let's cover an actual boss fight opener and rotation. Open with Windbite weaving Mage's Ballad and Bloodletter. Then Venomous Bite weaving Battle Voice and Raging Strikes. Heavy Shot weaving Bloodletter and Barrage, then Straight Shot. This then leads to the general rotation. Maintain both Windbite and Venomous Bite. Reapply them a few seconds before they run out. During Mage's Ballad, weave Bloodletter whenever it is available. Once Mage's Ballad ends, weave Army's Paeon and continue the rotation. When there's nothing else, use Straight Shot if you can, Heavy Shot otherwise. Every 2 minutes, make sure to weave the whole selection of Mage's Ballad, Battle Voice, Raging Strikes, Barrage on cooldown a bit like in the opener. For area of effect adjustments, on exactly 2 targets, maintain both dots on both enemies, use Quick Knock and Wide Volley instead of Heavy Shot and Straight Shot, and use Reign of Death instead of Bloodletter, but still use Barrage on Straight Shot. On 3 or more targets, just use Quick Knock and Wide Volley. Otherwise, continue to do the rotation as on single target. With that, let's continue on past level 50. At level 52, you learn the ability Wanderer's Minuet, a third song to work alongside Mage's Ballad and Army's Paeon. Wanderer's Minuet boosts the critical hit rate of your party by 2% while it is in effect. You also learn the ability Pitch Perfect, which is useless on its own. Wanderer's Minuet is replaced by Pitch Perfect for the duration of the song. Whenever Repertoire activates with Wanderer's Minuet, you gain a stack of Repertoire, up to 3. And when you have at least 1 stack of this effect, you can use Pitch Perfect to spend all of them. More stacks mean increasingly more damage. Whenever you have 3 stacks, weave Pitch Perfect on your next opportunity. If the duration of Wanderer's Minuet is below 3 seconds, no more repertoire procs will happen before the song ends, so make sure to use Pitch Perfect to spend any remaining stacks at that point. Pitch Perfect makes Wanderer's Minuet the strongest of the 3 songs for any number of targets, and so you should pair all your big cooldowns with Wanderer's Minuet instead. This means Raging Strikes, Barrage and Battle Voice and anything else you might have. After that, use Mage's Ballad and then finish off with Army's Paeon. Naturally, durations of 45 seconds and cooldowns of 120 seconds means that to loop this system perfectly, you need to end at least 1 song early. It is recommended that you stay in Wanderer's Minuet for at least 43 seconds, just long enough to Pitch Perfect that last stack you might get. Mage's Ballad for 43 seconds, again, just long enough to have the opportunity to get a proc, and then only around 34 seconds for Army's Paeon. The most important part here is that Wanderer's Minuet should last as long as possible and always be used alongside your other 2-minute cooldowns, so you have some wiggle room between Mage's Ballad and Army's Paeon to learn with. At level 54, you learn the ability Empyreal Arrow, which is an OGCD like Bloodletter that you use on cooldown. Since it does not have a charge system and does more damage, it should take priority over Bloodletter. At level 56, you learn the weapon skill Iron Jaws, which in addition to doing some damage, refreshes the duration of your dots, but only if they're already active. It should be noted that functionally, Iron Jaws replaces the dots, so if you have any damage buffs up while using it, this is applied. With this weapon skill, under most circumstances, you would apply your dots at the start of a fight and then use Iron Jaws to reapply them throughout the fight. Always make sure to use Iron Jaws to apply your dots when you can. At level 60, you learn the ability Sidewinder, which is yet another OGCD, although this one is on a minute-long cooldown. In an opener context, you can delay Sidewinder until after Empyreal Arrow and the first charge of Bloodletter, as the long cooldown of Sidewinder means that less is lost by delaying it. Every other minute, make sure to use Sidewinder while affected by Raging Strikes and Battle Voice to make the most of it. Since level 50, Wanderer's Minuet is introduced as the new strongest song of choice. Sidewinder and Empyreal Arrow are also introduced as more OGCD attacks to use alongside Bloodletter. Finally, Iron Jaws makes it much easier to keep your dots up on a target as soon as they have been applied at the start. To incorporate all these new toys, you can adjust your opener as follows. Start with Windbite, weaving Wanderer's Minuet and Empyreal Arrow. Venomous Bite weaving Battle Voice and Raging Strikes. Heavy Shot weaving Bloodletter. Heavy Shot weaving Barrage. straight shot weaving Sidewinder, and then continue heavy shot and straight shot while weaving Bloodletters until just before Battle Voice will end. Here you can use Iron Jaws to reapply your dots with a damage boost. Note that after the initial few double weaves, things are only single weaved. This is done intentionally to make space so you can weave pitch perfect when or if you hit 3 repertoire stacks. These open spaces can be used for Bloodletter as well when pitch perfect is not ready. For your songs, hold Wanderer's Minuet until there's about 1 or 2 seconds left on it, then switch to Mage's Ballad and hold this one until there's about 1 or 2 seconds left on it, and then for Army's Paeon, simply switch to Wanderers for your burst, which would mean effectively that Army's Paeon ends when there is around 10 to 12 seconds left on it. In a dungeon context, it can sometimes be hard to keep the buffs rolling nicely, and my best suggestion here is to maybe start the next song a little earlier or later to make sure you can run between packs with the song active if you can. The best song to have taking along as you run is Army's Paeon as well, but given the time of a pull, this is likely only sometimes even an option. At level 62, you learn the ability Troubadour, which is a raid-wide defensive cooldown, reducing damage taken for everyone. Whenever you expect raid-wide damage incoming, use this. You can also use it if the tank is taking a heavy beating to help them out. At level 64, Venomous Bite and Windbite permanently upgrade to Caustic Bite and Storm Bite respectively. On 2 targets, they're both better than Quick Knock if they last 15 seconds. On 3 targets, they need to last 30 seconds. I recommend applying Storm Bite, then Caustic Bite, while the tank is pulling and you cannot reliably hit 3 targets with Quick Knock, and then still just resort to Quick Knock and Wide Volley once you can hit the entire pack. At level 66, you learn the ability Nature's Minne, which increases the healing received by you and your party. This can be very helpful to use to help your healers recover after raid-wide damage. In solo play, it is mainly helpful to increase the healing of Second Wind. At level 68, Empyreal Arrow is upgraded to instantly activate repertoire for your current song whenever it is used. This makes it much more valuable to use as often as you can. When done perfectly, you should seek to always have 3 Empyreal Arrows during Wanderer's Minuet, and then 2 in both Mage's Ballad and Army's Paeon. Given that there will be 8 Empyreal Arrows at most in 2 minutes, there is likely a 3rd arrow in either Mage's Ballad or Army's Paeon, but which one gets this one is less significant. If you're going to weave Empyreal Arrow on the next GCD, and you have 2 repertoire stacks in Wanderer's Minuet, use Pitch Perfect here to make sure you don't risk wasting a repertoire stack from the regular timer and Empyreal Arrow overlapping. At level 70, your straight shot is permanently upgraded to Refulgent Arrow, significantly increasing its potency. This mainly means that Barrage is better spent on Refulgent Arrow on up to 3 targets. On 4 or more, Wide Volley takes back the lead. Since level 60, you've learned a bunch of utility and gotten some potency boosts. Overall, your opener and rotation is completely unchanged, but you should try more aggressively to make sure Empyreal Arrow is used on cooldown, as the repertoire procs it grants makes it incredibly powerful. At level 72, Wide Volley permanently upgrades to Shadow Bite, significantly increasing its potency. This makes Shadow Bite better to use Barrage on 3 or more targets once again. At level 76, Heavy Shot permanently upgrades to Burst Shot, increasing its potency as well as increasing its chance to grant Hawk's Eye to 35%. You also gain the trait Bite Mastery too, which makes Storm Bite, Caustic Bite and Iron Jaws each also have the same 35% chance to grant Hawk's Eye. None of these things change your rotation, and you should prioritize applying Storm Bite and Caustic Bite over spending Refulgent Arrow at the start of a fight, and while you can plan around it, Iron Jaws should be more important than using Refulgent Arrow, as reversing the order sometimes can cause your dots to drop, which should be avoided. If you plan around reapplying your dots when they reach a duration of 5 seconds, you can almost always fit both Refulgent Arrow and Iron Jaws in whichever order you need. At level 78, Army's Paeon is expanded with the Army's Muse and Army's Ethos. If Army's Paeon runs out naturally, you're granted Army's Ethos, which gives you up to 30 seconds to activate Army's Muse. Army's Muse activates when you play either Wanderer's Minuet or Mage's Ballad while Army's Paeon or Army's Ethos is active, and means the first 10 seconds of either song brings about 75% of Army's Paeon's effect in with it. This is the reason why we always use Army's Paeon last in the order, because this means that Army's Paeon automatically leads into Wanderer's Minuet, which is the strongest of the songs and so where you will use all your cooldowns anyway. If you followed the song order and timing mentioned earlier, then this changes nothing for your rotation, except that you should always try to late weave Wanderer's Minuet to fit as many GCDs in the Army's Muse window as possible. Just as a reminder, this order I mentioned is 43 seconds of Wondrous Minuet, 43 seconds of Mage's Ballad, and 34 seconds of Army's Paeon. Approximately, of course. At level 80, you unlock the Soul Voice gauge. Every time Repertoire activates, either automatically or by Empyreal arrow, you gain 5 Soul Voice gauge, up to a maximum of 100. You also learn the weapon skill Apex Arrow, which, while it only costs 20 Soul Voice gauge to use, should preferably only be used at 80 or more. Starting at 100 potency in a line AoE, this attack gradually increases in potency up to 500 at 100 Soul Voice gauge. This means that at 80 it does 400 potency. Over 2 minutes, you should typically be able to expect to gain between 160 and 200 Soul Voice gauge. If you use Apex Arrow somewhere in the middle of Mage's Ballad, when Wondrous Minuet has around 60 seconds left on its cooldown, you should have another Apex Arrow for when all your damage boosting cooldowns are ready. If you've used this Mage's Ballad Apex Arrow and then reach 100 Soul Voice gauge before Wondrous Minuet, I recommend just waiting for your cooldowns and using it alongside them. Since level 70, your chance to generate Hawk's Eye procs has increased on single target, and Shadow Bite replaced Wide Volley. Army's Paeon was also improved to grant some of its effect in the follow-up song, making it very beneficial to late weave Wondrous Minuet to get the most of this effect. You also got the Soul Voice gauge and Apex Arrow, which should be used once per minute, heavily favoring holding the second one, even should you cap out on gauge, until your burst. The main idea though is to aim to use Apex Arrow with 80 or more gauge. At level 82, Quick Knock permanently upgrades to Ladon's Bite, boosting its potency and increasing the chance to grant Hawk's Eye, but otherwise changing nothing about your rotation. At level 84, Bloodletter and Reign of Death now can hold 3 charges. This also does not change your rotation. I do recommend considering stockpiling 1 or 2 charges when Wondrous Minuet is about to come up, to get some extra damage in the damage buffs. At level 86, whenever you use Apex Arrow with at least 80 Soul Voice gauge, it turns into the weapon skill Blast Arrow, which you should always follow up with afterwards. This is the reason why it is crucially important Apex Arrow is always used with at least 80 Soul Voice gauge. Take note that the potency of Blast Arrow is not affected by how much Soul Voice gauge you spent on Apex Arrow, and also that while Blast Arrow is also a line AoE, it does the vast majority of its damage to the first target in the line. Also take note that you can fill other weapon skills between the 2 casts, as Blast Arrow is accessed with the Blast Arrow Ready buff, not as a combo action. At level 88, Troubadour's cooldown is reduced slightly, which does not change much for you. At level 90, your gauge is expanded with the Coda markers, and you learn the ability Radiant Finale. When any of your 3 songs are cast, you are given a coda corresponding to that one song. Then, when Radiant Finale is cast, it grants you and your party a damage boost for a bit, depending on how many different coda you have. In your opener, you should use Radiant Finale with just 1 coda. Every subsequent Radiant Finale will then be fully powered as you go into Wondrous Minuet on the 2-minute burst anyway. Since level 80, Apex Arrow has been upgraded to lead into Blast Arrow, and you learned Radiant Finale. The way this changes your opener is that you simply late weave Battle Voice after Caustic Bite, and then weave Radiant Finale and Raging Strikes together on the follow-up burst shot, pushing back your other cooldowns by 1 GCD. Aside from this, the opener is unchanged. Your 2-minute burst should be adjusted in a similar fashion. At level 92, Bloodletter permanently upgrades to Heartbreak Shot, massively boosting its potency, but otherwise changing nothing for your rotation. At level 94, Second Wind is upgraded to heal you more, and the potencies of Burst Shot, Refulgent Arrow, Empyreal Arrow, Sidewinder, and Apex Arrow are increased. This changes nothing for your rotation, however. At level 96, Barrage is upgraded to grant Resonant Arrow Ready, and turn into Resonant Arrow until this is spent. This is a weapon skill that you should of course use during your bursts. At level 98, Troubadour is upgraded to reduce damage taken by 15% instead of 10%. This changes nothing about how you use it. At level 100, Radiant Finale is upgraded to grant Radiant Encore Ready and turn into Radiant Encore until it is spent. Radiant Encore is yet another weapon skill that you should use whenever it is offered. Notably, its damage scales with the amount of coda you had when you used Radiant Finale, but this does not really change anything about when or how you use it. Now, to round off, let's first talk about an opener followed by general rotation as well as how to work with the 2-minute burst. And finally, let's briefly touch on stat priorities on gear. Bard has some more advanced openers that make use of tricks regarding combat lag and also optimize about certain skill speeds. However, this opener should serve you well in general. Let's begin. open with Stormbite, weaving Wondrous Minuet and Empyreal Arrow, then use Caustic Bite, and if you intend to use a gem draft, do this here, and then late weave Battle Voice. Then use Burst Shot, weaving Radiant Finale and Raging Strikes, Burst Shot, weaving Heartbreak Shot, then Radiant Encore, weaving Barrage, Refulgent Arrow, weaving Sidewinder, Resonant Arrow, weaving Empyreal Arrow, another Burst Shot, then Iron Jaws, weaving Heartbreak Shot, and then Burst Shot, weaving Pitch Perfect before all buffs end. Every Burst Shot here can be replaced with Refulgent Arrow if Hawk's Eye is available, and whenever 3 repertoire stacks are reached, weave Pitch Perfect as possible in the various openings. Unused openings can be used for Heartbreak Shot. This then leads to the general rotation. Your song sequence is optimally 43 seconds of Wondrous Minuet, 43 seconds of Mage's Ballad, and then 34 seconds of Army's Paeon. You can also adjust the plan and timing of some of these songs around their specific encounter for further optimization. This can be especially significant with the stops and starts of dungeon pulls. The important part is that Wondrous Minuet should last as long as possible, Army's Paeon should get 4 stacks before you switch to Wondrous Minuet, and of course, the full combined duration of your 3 songs should always add up to 120 seconds. Use Burst Shot and Refulgent Arrow as fillers between other actions. Make sure to use Iron Jaws in good time enough that your dots don't fall off. I recommend refreshing when the dots are at around 5 seconds or less. Heartbreak Shot should be weaved at any good opportunity, although leading up to Wondrous Minuet, meaning during Army's Paeon, you could stockpile 2 of them to use in the 2-minute burst. Empyreal Arrow should always be used as close to exactly on cooldown as possible, and if you have 2 stacks of repertoire during Wondrous Minuet, I recommend that you use Pitch Perfect just before Empyreal Arrow becomes ready, so that you don't need to risk both getting a natural proc and an Empyreal proc in the same instant and thus losing one. Sidewinder should be used on cooldown as well, but should you need to choose, Empyreal Arrow should go first. You can expect to get 2 Apex Arrows at 80 or more Soul Voice gauge in 2 minutes. This suggests that if you plan Apex Arrow around the time you would use Sidewinder or so, you should be doing pretty good. Another way to keep track is to use it when Mage's Ballad's duration is around halfway through, as following the general song rotation, you should use Apex Arrow around the middle of Mage's Ballad, assuming you have at least 80 gauge. This of course leads to the immediate Blast Arrow follow-up. Assuming you enter the burst window with plenty of duration on your dots, the main idea is that you enter with a late weaved Wondrous Minuet and weave Battle Voice, Radiant Finale and Raging Strikes in a similar fashion as in the opener, and in the case of Battle Voice and Raging Strikes, as close to on cooldown as possible. I recommend prioritizing cooldowns and Apex Arrow and Blast Arrow, as they have more fixed timings where they have to be used, over the Something Ready attacks, as they have a 30-second time frame to be spent typically. This mainly revolving around Radiant Encore and Resonant Arrow. Remember to use Pitch Perfect when it hits 3 stacks, and use Empyreal Arrow on cooldown, as well as keeping Heartbreak Shot from hitting 3 charges. And don't forget Sidewinder. Make sure to use Iron Jaws on the final GCD before raid buffs run out, and assuming everything goes to plan, in regards to GCDs, your burst should include Apex Arrow, Blast Arrow, Barraged, Refulgent Arrow, Radiant Encore, Resonant Arrow, 2 or 3 Burst Shots or Refulgent Arrows, as well as 1 Iron Jaws. Not necessarily in that order. For AoE adjustments, on 2 or more targets, Burst Shot is replaced with Ladon's Bite, Refulgent Arrow is replaced with Shadow Bite, and Heartbreak Shot is replaced with Rain of Death. On 3 or more targets, I recommend skipping applying your dots as well. On 4 or more targets, use Barrage on Shadow Bite instead of Refulgent Arrow. All of your other cooldowns and actions should be used like on single target. Finally, regarding stat priorities, take note that in nearly every single case, item level beats out optimal secondary stats. This means you should always prioritize gear with higher item level as long as it has dexterity on it. After that, Bard's stat priority is critical hit, then determination and direct hit. Determination and direct hit are almost identical in value, with determination being a tiny bit better, so try to aim for them to be about equal, with determination slightly ahead. Bard can benefit very slightly from having a GCD of 2.49 or even 2.48. However, this is partly down to preference, and aside from this, skill speed is not a very helpful stat for bards. Now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to support me and my channel more directly, you can become a member like these wonderful people here. You can also alternatively support me through Ko-Fi, link in the description. You can also support the channel by letting the YouTube algorithm know by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing, sharing, and hitting the bell to get notified when next I post a video. Fun fact, White Volley was originally an alternative AoE option for bards back in A Realm Reborn and Heavensward. It did about the same damage as Quick Knock, but the alternative area shape could sometimes be considered helpful. In Stormblood, the action was removed entirely and was re-implemented as a low-level version of Shadowbite with the release of Dawntrail.